Friends, Jimmy LaRose here with Powell. Paul is, of course, the Senior Vice President of Development Systems International. And as you know, DSI deploys major gifts campaigns all across the nation and has done it for 34 years. But nearly 20 years ago, Paul and I found ourselves at a conference and we began to enjoy each other and spend time together. And what we discovered is that we had shared values. We had shared values in the way we lived our life. We had shared values in the way we love our families. But for fun, we had shared values when it comes to inviting donors to give their best gift to important missions, just like yours. Now, friends, there are a lot of activities that occur in a development office. And it could be events. It could be meeting face-to-face. It could be going to a networking moment and maintaining a new friendship. But the truth of the matter is, in every one of these relationships, there does need to come a point where you invite a person to make a yes-no decision about their particular financial investment. And believe it or not, that we have to relationship build. If you use Major Gifts Ramp Up, you won't have to wait that long before you've earned the right to invite a person to give maybe their best gift ever. Now, I created a Major Gifts Ramp Up over 30 years ago. When Hall joined the firm, he said, Jimmy, I love the Major Gifts Ramp Up model. And then he went ahead and changed it all. It used to be a rectangle. Now it's a pyramid, all because of Hall's influence on my life. Friends, you'll remember that chapter 12 is making the three-part ask, doing it often and doing it well. Making the three-part ask for an operations gift for 5 years, for a one-time capital gift for 5 years, and an endowment gift, which could be expressed with an estate or a planned gift. So everything that Hall and I are going to be discussing today, which by the way is titled Listening Your Way to the Major Gift, it is for the purpose of getting to chapter 12 of the Major Gifts Ramp Up model so we can invite a person to invest. Paul, as I read your article, Listening Your Way to a Major Gift, you expressed two big ideas in one sentence. A nonprofit's inability to secure a best gift is dependent on how well or poorly they listen and their reluctance to ask. Oh, I think there would be less reluctance to ask if the team member actually did a little bit of listening first. Let me turn it over to you. Go ahead.
Well, thank you, Jimmy. Yeah, I really believe that I think especially in our culture today but I think it's always been true. We like to be heard. We being whether it's a donor or in personal relationships. In a conversation, we like to be able to express ourselves and know that we're being heard. I think that's just ingrained in us as human beings. And when people actually listen to our conversations, it's either suddenly or even blatantly registers in our consciousness that these people really care, that they're really interested in my thoughts and what I'm saying, what I'm feeling. So I think just basic human nature, we as individuals, we like to be heard. I think the bigger problem is we have a harder time listening to other people, to what their interests are, what their passions are, what their feelings are, and in the situation of the development environment of asking for a major gift, I think it's really important that we really be able to hear whether or not a person understands why we're making the ask, understands our project, our organization, the need that we're representing that must be filled with their help. And we have an opportunity to not only honor them by listening to them, to hear them, to discern what their thoughts are as it relates to our conversation, but also to get to know them as human beings, as individuals. It could very well be that our time of making an ask for a charitable gift to our organization may not immediately produce the fruit we would like, which would be the gift of philanthropy in some form. But what we may have done is created a personal human relationship that, while maybe not bearing financial fruit now, not only could do that later, but we've also developed a long-term personal relationship with an individual. Listening is so important in our personal lives, and it's so important in our professional lives. It takes some doing, it takes practicing, but most of all, you got to want to. You got to really sincerely want to hear the other person, what they're saying, what's in their heart, what's on their mind, what their needs are, what their joys are, just everything about them. And that comes with just listening.
Paul, it's like nails across a chalkboard when we have that new visitor who's actually going to go on a call and actually invite a person to give their best gift. And out of nervousness, they may find themselves talking and talking and talking and talking about how great the nonprofit is and the impact that it's making. And then they get to the actual project and they talk and they talk and they talk and they talk and they talk. And they don't let the donor get a word in edgewise because they're nervous. I wonder how a fundraiser would discipline themselves to relax and for it to be more normal, if you will, more personal when we're up. And by the way, Paul, let's just assume that we've earned the right. Let's assume that the donor prospect knows that we're coming over to invite them to give the gift. So that's behind us. So we're sitting down because we've taken the months that it's required to earn the right. So let's assume that they know we're going to ask them. I wonder what a fundraiser can do to relax themselves and everybody in the room as they embark on making the ask.
Well, the way I like to approach it with Major Gift Ramp Up, which is really the way I've always approached any sales opportunity throughout my professional lifetime, is to make sure that the prospective donor or buyer, depending where you're working, make sure they're clear about what you're asking them to consider. So with Major Gift Ramp Up, one of the things I love, there's so many things about Major Gift Ramp Up I love, as you know, but one of the things I really love and appreciate about Major Gift Ramp Up is by the time we get to this point of where we are going to make the ask, as you said, we've been invited to come and talk to them. They know why we're coming. We know that they've had some preparation. They've been to an awareness event, a non-fundraising event, where we have presented our program to them. We call it the case for support. They've gotten to hear firsthand testimonies or whatever about how this organization that we're representing has impacted lives for good. And they've got some good background. And in addition to that, we've prepared a written document that gives even greater and more detailed information. And I like to usually just open the conversation after talking about their personal lives, which I like to do first, show interest for them, their family, their individuality, depending on what the individual relationship is with this person and what their situation is. I like to have just a conversation, a quick, just person-to-person conversation. And when I sense the time is right to transition to making the philanthropic ask, the first thing I usually say is I would say to you, Jimmy, if you were my prospective donor, I'd say, Jimmy, I know you've gotten a lot of information for us through the event and our chats we've had up till now. And I've provided you with that case booklet, that beautiful brochure. let me just ask you right now, do you have any questions unanswered? Is everything clear to you about our project and what we're doing, or any comments or observations about what we're doing? And then I just be quiet and listen. And that,
So let's do this then. So Jimmy, do you have any questions up to this point? And I would say, Paul, I'm aware of the one-time project and I see the budget, but what can you tell me about beyond the building being built? Is this project sustainable?
and I would say, Jimmy, that's a great question. I'm so glad you asked me that question. And the answer is yes. And let me share with you how it's sustainable. And that makes it an even more powerful opportunity to support something that not only has an immediate impact, but an everlasting impact, if you will. So that would give me an opportunity to come back that situation to not only answering his question and showing deference to his insensitivity to his interests, but now I've got an opportunity to tell him even more that I haven't already told him, to sell him more benefits and more reasons why he or she should consider making a major gift to the project.
Paul, in the same vein, Stephanie Stark would consider you one of the most significant influences in her life. And that over 15 years ago, together, you led a major gifts ramp up campaign together while Stephanie was serving a nonprofit. Recently, she has come up with a new term. Anytime you go to a fundraising conference, everybody is talking about the importance of telling stories. You got to tell your story. And by the way, that's just another aspect of case. It's called storytelling. Stephanie has concluded that storytelling is important, but story listening is the key into a donor's heart. And what she means by story listening is listening to the donor's personal story. I wonder how you get a donor to reference their own story when you're making the ask.
Well, actually, in the article that I wrote on listening your way to the ask, I mentioned a situation that I had when I was the chief development officer for a major medical center, and we were in the early throes of a $37 million campaign, and this prospect that I was going to, he and his wife, and it was a situation like we've already described. The time was right to go and make the visit, and they knew why we were coming. But I had had the opportunity to be with the husband, socially and casually, played a couple rounds of golf with him, got to learn about his family and his business. He had retired from the medical surgical supply business as a chief CEO of a major supply corporation. And I got to know a lot about him personally. In fact, playing golf, we just talked about personal things. And I got to talk a lot about where I'd been and what I'd doing. We got to know each other as human beings. And so when it came time to make the ask, I was able to listen to them talking about what their current interests were. They were asking me questions about the medical center and plans for going forward. They were very aware of the project that I was raising money for, and they were very interested in that project. And when I right to the point of changing over from our casual conversations about family and things in the community and people we knew, I began asking in the same way that I mentioned a minute before. I said, John, uh, knowing about this project that we're doing in this campaign they're in, do you have any questions about it? And he said, yeah, Hold, let me just share with you what Sharon and I really are focused on. And then he spent about another 20, 30 minutes talking about a new children's hospital and why they were interested in children. And while everybody's interested in defeating cancer, his heart was with the children. And I was able to discuss that at length with him. And then he himself said, Hall, I am going to give to this cancer campaign. We want to help. It's not at the level of gift that you would like for me to give. But when you're ready to build and talk about the campaign for the new children's hospital, come see us first. We want to make the lead gift. And that was done later. But that's because I listened and I was willing to listen, and I was able to find where their heart really was and to honor that with them, but not stray away from my original purpose. It was a matter of, where does your passions fit in with this current need? Is there a place for it? And if so, in what way? If not, that's okay. We'll be great friends. And I guarantee I'll be back to you to talk about the children's hospital. But he made a major 5-figure gift to that campaign. And when it came time for the children's hospital, they were ready to make the lead gift to that campaign.
Paul, I was 23 at Joy Ranch Home for Children, my first development position. I'd been there a couple of years, but in my third year, we received a $10,000 check off of a direct mail appeal. And I was smart enough to realize that without this family knowing us, sending $10,000, and that might as well have been 30,000 in today's money. Sending $10,000, I felt like she was trying to send us a signal by sending that gift out of the blue. It was Mrs. Waugh, and she had worked at the Tuskegee Institute with George Washington Carver, and she cared about children's education. So I would go up from Galax, Virginia, up to Arlington, and I would sit there and she would share poems with me with her husband, Bill. It was like visiting the widows in their affliction. And we were building a new cottage for the children's at the children's home. And I invited her to be on the campaign cabinet and to provide a lead gift. And she said, Jimmy, first of all, we love you. And I know that you love us. Now, I'm going to give you a $5,000 gift towards the cottage, but I'd like to teach you a better way to fundraise. If you'd been listening, you would know that I care about children's education, not sheltering them. And when it's time to build the Christian school on campus, come to us and we will make the lead gift.
Yeah.
But she literally accused me of not listening to her heart in the most gentle and gracious way. And all I think that has to do with, when you talk about a donor's need to give or our need to get, what is it that you share?
The greatest philanthropic and the best philanthropic gift is not the gift that meets my need to have, but it does meet the need of the donor to give. That is the best philanthropic gift. It meets the need. It satisfies the need of the donor to give, not my need to get.
So arguably, the only way you figure out what a donor's need is to ask questions gracefully and listen.
Exactly. And then in listening, then you know better how to continue the conversations and continue the process that would lead ultimately to ask. Now, in that same campaign, there was one other potential major donor that I had been cultivating and developing a relationship with over several months, getting to know him first as a board member of the hospital, meeting his wife, his family, visiting actually in his home, some attending different social events, for other fundraisers in the community, that sort of thing. But during a period of time, probably about 6 months, I really got to know him well, his wife. We got to be as friendly with each other. Socially, I wasn't in his social set, but we became friends. And and I had a lot of conversations with him about the medical center, about the cancer research center project, and so forth through those 6 months. But I spent personal time with him, talking and listening. We came to a place where a very wealthy person in the community offered to have a cocktail party at her home, a very beautiful antebellum home, and she was opening it up to all her friends, to meet us and meet me and to meet the CEO of the hospital, and for just to mingle with her friends and give us an opportunity to say a few things about the new research center that we were going to have in the community, to be funded by the campaign that we were launching at that point. Well, by this time, this particular major donor prospect, he and I and his wife and my wife had had an opportunity to get to know each other and to develop a relationship. Well, that evening at the cocktail party, which was lovely and beautiful, and the CEO of the hospital and I spoke a little bit about the project, just giving information. This individual I'm talking about stopped everybody. He tapped on his cocktail glass and said, I want to make a comment." So he comes up to the CEO and me and chats for a minute, and he said, "I just want you to know uh, that you haven't asked me yet, but I want you to know that I am supporting this campaign." He reaches into his coat pocket and brings out a check for $6 million. Now, and that
Huh.
was our first lead gift to the campaign. Uh, and but it we had listened our way to that ask, and we had listened by developing a relationship of mutual respect and friendship, so that in that case I didn't even have to ask. He could not wait to give, but he wanted the right setting, the right time, where he thought would have the greatest impact for our campaign and for us to ask others, because he gave it in the midst of his peers, and he set the example.
Well, your friend was evidently a seasoned philanthropist and
Yes.
also probably served on campaign cabinets.
Oh, yes, no
But I
question.
do love what you said. You had not yet given him a formal proposal,
No.
but he wanted to leverage his gift. But because you built trust,
Yes.
because you listened, he certainly he certainly knew that this was the proper place for him to invest, and he wanted to do it public to inspire others. Hey, this is what reminds me of all our empirical study shows of the different reasons people give. The top five are this: number one, belief in the mission of the institution;
Yes.
number two, fiscal stability;
Yes.
number three, interest in a specific project;
Yeah.
number four, confident that the staff can do it; and number five, that there's been campaign volunteers that have associated themselves. So the top five reasons that a person gives: belief in the mission, fiscal stability, interest in a project, staff can do it, and you already have some other people aligned with you. Paul, I do not know, unless you listen, how you can determine a person's interest in a specific project. And by the way, with Mrs. Waugh, I was imposing my project, a cottage, when she wanted to give to education. So let's just talk about the fact that unless we listen, we cannot understand donor interest.
Well, that's exactly right. And I think when I was meeting with this individual over those months, it was the number four on your list that I think was his primary concern.
Confidence
He,
in the staff.
yeah, he actually had been affiliated with the hospital longer than I had. He'd been on the board. He'd been in a lot of the planning. His interest was whether or not is our new chief development officer is going to be able to provide the leadership to be successful in the campaign. I believe that was his, at that point, was his primary concern. And so just in developing my relationship with him, spending time with him, listening to him, getting to know him, he evidently became convinced that I was going to be able to have a successful campaign, that he could safely give his money, and that it would go for the purpose for which he was giving it, and that he wouldn't be in it all by himself, that others would follow and it'd be a successful campaign. All five of those principles were working, but four of the five, or three of the five at least, he already had satisfied himself with. He was all for the project and the need. But we were talking about a lot of money. It was the largest major gift campaign that community ever had. And maybe since then, I'm not sure. So he was, and he had made his money investing. His wealth came from, his background was in banking, and he became an investing professional. And this was going to be a big investment. And he wanted to be sure the return on it, which would be the success of the campaign, thus the building of the Advanced Cancer Research Institute, would actually become a reality. So all five of those principles were working.
Yeah, but I love what you said. Whatever the total dollar amount, it was a heavy reach. That total dollar amount, and he wasn't going to give 6 million unless he was confident that you could reach and exceed goal. I believe, though, with those meetings, you made him feel understood. You had listened to his heart, and you probably let him know that it's not just you, Jack. We've got this family and this family and this family, and here are the people that are on the campaign cabinet. And because you knew he needed to be sure that we were going to reach goal because you listened to him, it may have changed the information that you shared with him that would give him confidence. It is funny, though, you did such a good job that you didn't even ask and you got 6 million.
Right. In a sense, I asked without asking. Now, that was a very unique situation. And of course, the rest of the campaign, there was a lot of one-on-one opportunities to actually make the ask. But in every one of those cases, there was a great degree of listening before the ask was made. And our campaign team, our campaign cabinet, was trained on how to make the ask in the way we train in Major Gift Ramp Up. And we focused on listening our way to the ask.
Hall, when we train our visitors, let's say it's 12 to 15 people, we're going to take responsibility to do 5 asks each over a 6-month period of time. This is fascinating. And I'm going to throw you a curveball here because we haven't talked about this. If a person raises an objection on that call and we don't respond to it properly, they are certainly not going to feel like they have been listened to. So one of the best ways that we can listen is hear an objection and have a truthful response that gives the donor confidence. How do we equip our campaign cabinet members to deal with objections?
Great question. And that's so important that we do deal with it. I remember just coincidentally in that same campaign, and I could recall many other campaigns, but I remember very specifically in that campaign, there was one prospective donor we had, a very wealthy businessman, a businessman there in the city. And I went to visit with him to make the ask. And again, leading up to that, a lot of cultivation went into it, as far as visits and conversations and meeting together in different places and different settings, like I've been describing, socially and otherwise. And when I made the appointment to go see him, in that conversation, that I was having with him and listening to him, an objection came up that he had kind of was reluctant to talk about prior to that. And it was kind of stuffed inside of him and kind of burning, but he hadn't discussed it yet. And he had a very strong objection based on false information. He
Ah,
was he had a concern for the medical center because someone had told him something that was negative, and it was not true. And in that situation, I said something to the effect to him, I am so glad you brought this up, and you need to hear the right answer. Let me just say what you're concerned about is not based on fact and truth, but you need to hear it from the right source. Would you be willing to meet with, and I've talked, the name of the CEO of the hospital, would you be willing to meet with him to discuss this need? I think if nothing else, you need to get this resolved, even if you never supported our campaign. And he did. I made an appointment for the three of us to meet, the CEO of the hospital, myself, and the prospective donor. And we spent about 30 minutes together in the CEO's office discussing this one objection, which was a very important question. And I could understand once I heard that, after I'd listened, and once I heard what was stuffed down inside that he had not yet revealed, which was an obstacle to overcome to making a gift. If I had proceeded asking without dealing with this, we would not have gotten a gift.
Paul,
But I,
I know that we want to always protect people and but I think our audience would be curious in this particular case, what was his objection?
well, it had to do with management of the medical center. It was a management issue. And actually had to do with the whole question of indigent care and how much money was being spent on indigent care. And he had some wrong information and wrong information about bottom line earnings of the medical center.
Ah,
And yeah,
oh,
yeah. And but an important question. If you're asking somebody to consider a high 6, 7 figure gift, and they got financial concerns about the organization you represent, then they may be reluctant to give in money. He had the capacity and the ability to make that gift, but he wasn't sure that he wanted to give the money based on this concern he had about financials. So we were able to resolve it. In fact, it turned out to be a very harmonious meeting, and his impression of the CEO was all erroneous, and he found that out. And so that was all cleared up, and he became a champion for our campaign. He got involved in it and helped us with the campaign. But it was because in listening, I found that objection, it was uncovered, and we were able to address it. Now, the most important thing at that point was dealing with the objection, not my asking for the money, not my making the ask. The most important thing was the relationship with my organization. And so that became the focus, was his concern, not my needs.
I I think what I'm concluding from this section is sometimes listening leads to an action step that needs to occur in advance of making the final ask. So listening can lead to actions that are required.
Right, right.
Well, go ahead.
Well, I think one of the problems with so many campaigns that you and I have both seen through the years working with clients is when they put together a visitor team, the volunteer askers, if you will. They've not been trained properly on how to do this, and it's almost like me going to you and saying, "Hey, Jimmy, you don't really know me, but I want to ask you for money."
Right.
Yeah, and you just cannot do that. It's wrong for so many different reasons, and it's so unnecessary. And the thing about it is when you actually get into the mode of listening your way to the ask, you make friends. You're having fun. You're getting to know people. They're getting to know you. You're expanding your whole cadre of friends. And then when the ask comes, it's almost automatic. And the fear is gone, the reluctance gone, and you know the worst thing they can say is no. They can't stand you up against the wall and shoot you. Uh, but the asking, when you build that relationship, becomes so natural, so real, and you know when the time is right. Uh, but it takes patience and it takes time.
You know, in closing here, Hall, and you can move the decimal point. I remember you went on a call for a nonprofit that was in a rural community. I'm talking 90 miles in every direction. Sometimes there wasn't an interstate. Uh, there certainly wasn't an urban center.
Right.
And you went into a call with, I believe, a person that was going to be on the campaign cabinet, and they had already decided what their gift amount was going to be. But you listened and you found yourself with them not giving the gift they intended to, but a much larger one. Let's close with that story. A major gifts
Yeah,
ramp up story, by the way.
it certainly is. That's one of my favorite stories. That was a wonderful visit. Yes, in that small rural town, and in fact, it was a wonderful campaign focused on the children in the community. And but the naysayers said, "Oh, you just can't raise money. People down here don't give. There's not that much money to start with." All the naysayers. But we knew we had a project that had to be successful for the benefit of those children in that community. And we had a small group of people that felt the same way that became our campaign cabinet, our volunteer visitors and askers. And the chair of that, the honorary chair actually of that committee, uh, wanted to go with me on one particular call of a friend, a fellow, a businessman there in the community, and and he was aware of our project and everything. And we had an appointment. We went to see him. My dear friend opened the conversation. We chatted about everything under the sun, crops and animals and weather and everything else. And finally, my partner on the ask on the call, our volunteer chair said, "Well, let me just turn this over to Hall." And so I started talking with him. I said, "I know you're very familiar with our project. Let me just share a few basic things with you that you might not know." And what I did is I shared with him why we needed gifts at certain levels of giving if we were going to be successful. And I had it all laid out graphically. And I just went through that real basically. And I showed him that we needed certain levels of gifts if we were going to be successful. And then I asked the question, I said, "Does that make sense to you? Do you have any questions about anything?" And he said, "You know what?" He said, "That really was helpful. Thank you. And I appreciate you all spending so much time today." He said, "I'm just going to tell you, I already had a check waiting for you because I knew why you're coming, of course. And check's already been written. It's $5,000 check. My secretary's got it." And he called Miss So and So, come in here. She came in the office. He said, "Tear that check up that I gave you and write one for 25,000." So, but it's because we went in and listened, made sure he understood the project and answered questions, because after I did show him graphically the levels of giving levels that we needed, there's so many gifts at certain levels in order to be, and how our top 20 gifts really were 85% of the total. And if we didn't achieve gifts at those levels, we couldn't be successful. He said, "That's amazing." He said, "I'm so glad you showed me that. It makes so much sense." And that's when he called his secretary in and had her write another check.
Paul, I'll be honest with you. You know, this session is about listening your way to the gift. there are some questions that donors have that they're not going to necessarily tell you about. But we pre-listen. We're experienced enough, even though they may not say it, we actually know that they have questions. And for this particular individual, the question in his mind was, I wonder how much I should give.
Right.
And
Right.
he decided in advance to write a check for 5,000, but he didn't know if that was the right amount. And you pre-listened in your heart, and you came with the gift range chart, and you showed him that we needed 10 $25,000 gifts, and he got his question answered about what his gift amount should be. So it's one thing to listen auditorially to a donor who's talking. It's another thing to wisely be listening for questions they may not even give words to.
Yes, that's right. That's right. And John D. Rockefeller of old once made the statement. He said, "I don't want anybody to tell me what to give, but I do want them to suggest an amount for me to consider." And I think
I'll
that's
say that again because people say, why are we asking a person for a specific amount? Tell us about Rockefeller again.
yes, he said that he didn't want anybody to tell him what to give. In other words, certainly, God forbid we ever say something like, "We got you down for $10,000." And people will do that, and it's offensive, and it's presumptuous, it's rude. He said, "I don't want that, but I do want you to suggest to me an amount to consider." So I already knew the amount I wanted to ask this fellow for, but I wanted him to see our range of gift chart, as you just explained, the levels of gift that we must have. And when he saw that, I was in effect asking, because I was asking him to consider those top 20 gift on the gift range chart. And when I showed him that, then it all clicked for him, and he told himself what to give. Now, had he not done that, what I would have said, "Now that you know this, would you consider making a gift at this level?" And which is not offensive to ask in that way. Would you be willing to consider making a gift at this level? He can say either yes, no, or something else. But you're exactly right. He self-selected as to what he wanted to give in that case.
You want to know what, Hall? We're being a little bit cryptic as we talk about these different opportunities. The story that you just shared. I'll tell you what I'm going to do before we end. Let me just go ahead here. I'm going to share my screen, and I'm actually going to share with the group that campaign that you're talking about. Hall, we just played that video. Does it remind you of anything?
Yeah, we went over goal. We had a $3 million goal originally, and we went over goal. And that was in a community where people said, as I mentioned before, you just couldn't raise that kind of money. But here's what happened. Children were dying in the summertime. Kids were swimming in farm ponds who had no swimming lessons, didn't know how to swim. They would drown, or as they were drowning, other kids would go try to rescue them because their friend was drowning and they drowned. And there was no place to swim, no place to learn to swim. And we had to help them build that Boys and Girls Club. We got the hearts of the community. It brought the whole community together. And because it centered around the children. And all these people opened up their hearts, they opened up their billfolds, their purses, and we would have people in the gas stations, in the convenience stores, just wanting to give you their change to help the children. Even people just passing through the community that heard about it. So it was a wonderful, wonderful campaign.
Well, Hall, the title of this was Listen Your Way to the Major Gift. And for a young person like me back in the day, or for somebody coming up, the first thing that you can do to develop your skill of listening is to stop talking yourself.
Well, like I quoted in my article from David Broder, the newscaster, don't waste the opportunity to listen. It's an opportunity if you're able to listen. Just listen.
Paul, I think that we're just continue to remain overwhelmed 20 years later. The fact that we continue to collaborate, and I can't wait to see what the next 20 years hold. Thanks for a great half hour. Well done. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Jimmy. Me too. Thank you. God bless.
Okay, I'm going to redo it. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Well, Hall, it has been a good meeting, and it's been very rich. And it's been 20 years. I can't wait to see what the next 20 have in store. Thanks for spending time with us.
Thank you, Jimmy. Thank you.
God bless, friends.
God bless.